Muhammadur Rasulullah.
Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome to today's program, Journey to Islam. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community is well recognized all over the world for its peaceful message. Thousands of people join Islam Ahmadiyyat every year, some facing extreme difficulties along the way. Join us and hear stories from people who have joined the Jamaat as to why they want to be part of Islam Ahmadiyyat, what actually attracts them to this community. On this program, you'll be hearing stories firsthand from people who have converted to Islam Ahmadiyyat. We have with us today Brother Hamza Ilyas, who comes from the US, African American, and he has agreed to share his stories with us. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Hamza, and welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. How do you feel today?
I feel fantastic.
Great. Thanks a lot. I'd like to start by talking about your childhood. How would you describe family life from early age?
I grew up in a very close-knit family. So my mother, my father, and my grandmother, so this is my father's mother, right, along with my 4 brothers and 1 sister. Right. So we grew up in a very tight-knit family, right, in a small village in New York, outside of the city. Right. And it was a relatively happy childhood. My grandmother was a Christian missionary, right, so we spent our childhood traveling with her and studying the Bible.
Right. Now, would you describe your childhood as very religious?
In some aspects, yes, meaning that we went to church every Sunday. We were drafted, as we like to say. We were forced to go to church every Sunday. Okay. With my grandmother, who I mentioned was a Christian missionary. Right. She had her own church, United Bible Church of God, Faria Baptized was the name of the church. So in that aspect, in terms of going with her every Sunday, revivals and these sorts of things, right, yes, it was very religious from that standpoint.
So would you say that you were strong in your faith?
I would say that I had a religious upbringing. Right. But I wouldn't say that I was strong in my faith. I think that my parents and my grandmother particularly, and my grandfather, because they established large church or large Christian communities, right, we were expected obviously to be a part of that, and that's all we knew. But I wouldn't say that we were particularly religious, though I think my family was traditional in the sense that there was no dating girls. We didn't really watch TV. Right. So from that aspect, yes, but I wouldn't consider myself, strong in my faith. I just followed along with what my parents and grandparents were doing.
Okay. Okay. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the period before your conversion. Can you relate any special incidents that changed your mind from being Christian to seek for another religion?
I think for the most part, as I got past the age of, say, 17, because after 17, my parents stopped compelling us to go with my grandmother to church on Sundays and so forth. And so with that being introduced, we simply stopped going. What happened for me on the intellectual side is I could not understand how Jesus, a human being, could be God. That concerned me. I didn't really understand that. And the whole 3 in 1, 1 in 3, God created everything that I could see. I was into science as a young child. Right. I loved science. Okay. And so the whole idea that God, who obviously created our planet, our solar system, our universe, could be a human being. Why not a tree, or why not fire, or why not a dog or a chicken? Why would it be a human being? Right. If he was a human being, then he could equally be any of those things. So that part I didn't understand. But on the flip side of it, because I understood the Bible, I enjoyed reading the Bible, I loved the life of Jesus, and I thought to myself that if God actually talked to all of the people who were there in the Bible, right, why couldn't he talk to me? So I wanted that relationship with God. I wanted that God should still, in fact, talk, and I wanted that I could have that relationship with him. And I was frustrated because I didn't think that my faith at that time could give that to me without me putting on an act. For an example, if I went to the church, I could see any of the missionaries or the deacons or the ushers, and it seemed to be the same people every Sunday, would fall out on the ground and they would catch the Holy Spirit and they would begin to speak in tongues and this sort of thing. And seeing this, I often went up there when you would repent of your sins and give testimonies. I would go there and I would cry very intently, I thought very sincerely, and I would hope that that would happen to me, but it never happened to me. Right. So I began to doubt whether that particular way was a real way and not an act. Right. So I lost interest and then started hanging out more with friends and going out, and I forsook the religious part of life.
Right. But we hear quite a bit about Islam and all the negatives. So how did you come to move towards Islam?
This was this was not my design. I was a banker, right. So I had a client one day. They were from Yemen. I was doing business with them, and so after we finished doing our business, I said to them, I don't agree with the killing of women and children and this sort of thing, but one of the things that strike me very odd about you Muslims is that you seem to be very convinced about your faith, that you're willing to even die for it. Like, growing up, I traveled with my grandmother, and I know many Christians, and we'll preach it on Sunday, but we're not going to die for it on no day at all. So what is it about your religion? So they told me it's our book. God dictated it. So because God dictated our book, we are very firm in the fact that this is from him. So I said, oh no, you mean it was inspired? Someone was feeling good one day and they wrote this, like the Bible. He says, no, God dictated it himself. So I said, come on, man, if God dictated this book, it should be the most famous book on the planet. Right. He says, it is. So I said, well, I haven't heard of it. He said, that's your problem.
Just like that.
Just like that, So okay, fair point. So we agreed to disagree. Right. Because being a pure Westerner, I had little or no exposure to Islam. Except the Muslims that were in the prisons. African Americans, we're not alien to the concept of Islam. In fact, most of the prison population are Muslims, right. From, in our jokes. But it doesn't seem to be a religion that we hear enough about to know about it. You respect them. In fact, there's a famous poem that says, where a poet says, my style gets respect like 50 Muslims. So in our community, this is a joke. It's a well-known thing that right. Muslims are intelligent, they're courageous, they're strong, and their faith is also based on reason as well. Right. But nobody knows anything beyond that. Okay. So Muslims get respect in our communities, but no one actually knows what it is. So that being the case, I looked at it as it was a religion where you have the terrorists who are fighting various world powers with rocks. Right. And that's about it.
So why did you want to be part of that?
Well, in my case, because I became friends with them and I started to learn a little bit more about the Quran in my discussions with them, one day I had a dream. You see, when I was 22, my father died. And after he passed away, my mother took his library and put it in boxes, and we put it in the basement in our house. Yeah. So from time to time, whenever I went to go visit my mom, I would go down into the basement and I would look through these boxes to see the different books that my father had. So one day I had a dream that I was down in the basement looking through a box, and I heard a voice that said, God is coming. So when I looked up, I saw a doorway, and all this light was coming out of this doorway, and it was pitch black in the basement, except for where this doorway was. Yeah. And then I saw someone start to walk down, and I only saw from the knees down, but I saw whoever it was wearing like a white robe, right. And so he had this like no shoes on. Okay. And the person started to walk down. So you see, when we were growing up, there's a belief among us Christians, yeah. That if you should see God, then you'll die. Right. So in the dream, I had this same sort of belief. Yeah. So I thought, oh my goodness, if I actually see God's face, if that's God, then I'm going to die. So I hid behind a pillar. But then I thought to myself, well, if that's God, then I really want to see what he looks like, you know. I've been waiting all my life to meet him. So when I peeked around, I saw that the person was gone, but the door was still open.
Right.
And when I looked down in the box, I lifted a book out of the box, and the dream ended. Anyway, I had to tell that story because some weeks after I started reading the Quran,
Right.
I was at my mother's house
Right.
in the basement, decided to look through some of the books, and opened up one of the boxes, and it turned out my father had a Quran.
Oh.
So this surprised me because I never knew my father had a copy of the Quran.
Right.
So I started to read it, but the more I read it, the more it scared me, actually, because I couldn't tell who was talking, but whoever was talking in this book seemed to kind of comment on human life in general, only spoke in black and white principles. There were believers and disbelievers.
Yeah.
And then the worst third group, which was the hypocrites. So anyway, the more I read it, the more it intrigued me.
Right.
And then that's when I became a Muslim, the more I read it, because I was sharing this with this Arab brother who told me about Islam.
Yeah.
And he gave me a debate between a Christian and a Muslim.
Right.
And I took it home and I watched it, and I was shocked at when the Christian was challenged, the Christian scholar was challenged in regards to the parts of the Bible that were changed.
Yeah.
He had no answer. And so that infuriated me because I watched my grandmother spend her entire life preaching this message, and my grandmother was a very simple, uneducated, but very righteous person.
Sure.
And I thought that if at the highest levels people know this, and you have all these sincere people who are promoting this, and they don't know it, then how could this be? So that's what started me into searching more and more. Right. And I began to fall in love with this book called the Quran. Right. And so that's what started me on the path.
Did you keep thinking about your dream then that led you to find this book?
Not at first, because I never had dreams or anything like that. I mean, that was a dream, though this is 10 years now, yeah, that still stays fresh in my mind. So what ended up happening is, though that first dream stuck out in my mind when it first happened to me, when I first found this book, yeah, it wasn't until I started to get more dreams repeatedly, right, that it made me stop. So I became a Muslim some months later. The more I researched it, the more I realized that this is what fits in with my belief. There's only one God, and he can't be a human being or a dog or a cat or a chicken or a cow. Sure. He's nothing like what we would know. And he has to be outside of his creation. This is my belief. Yeah. And this man, Muhammad, peace be upon him, he must be true because he says that all of the prophets were true. I mean, why would God have left out the people of Africa or the people of China? Sure. Why would he? No. So I believe that was also true. So it was right after that I became a Muslim, that I saw a dream where I walked into a room and a voice announced, "This is Muhammad." And I saw a tall, well-built man with a beautiful, thick beard, with a bright white turban standing there. And next to him was a man who looked similar to him, but was a bit shorter in stature. And I understood that the voice meant that one of them was Muhammad, but the other one next to him was in a way also Muhammad. So the taller one came over to me and embraced me and then put coins in my pocket. So when I woke up from that, I was actually shocked, because before then I had only read about the name Prophet Muhammad, in the Quran and in various books of hadith and in various commentaries. But this book was this dream was so real that when I woke up, I went to go check my pajama top, because I said, let me take a look at those coins, and only to realize that the shirt that I had on didn't have pockets. So anyway, it took me about a day or so, because when I got up, I looked in my dresser drawer and I'm thinking, where did I put those coins? It took me about a day to realize that dream was actually just a dream. But then other dreams started coming where I started to see the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, more and more frequent. And I would ask him questions. And then later on, when I found out about the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, that's when I saw a picture of the promised Messiah and Imam Mahdi, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, and I realized that's the man that was referred to also in the dream, who was standing side by side with the Holy Prophet. So right then and there, then I had absolute certainty about two things. Number one, that Islam was true,
Right.
and that this community was absolutely true.
Right.
In addition to that, though, I received certainty that God does, in fact, still talk. And that's what I had been searching for my entire life.
Was that not the case in Christianity?
No, not at all.
I see. So you saw this picture and then you realized that was the promised Islam. What did you do after that?
Well, this was after I had asked to become part of the community. So what ended up happening was later on, just to backtrack, later on, the more I researched Islam, I started to go to different mosques around my job, and I was just dissatisfied. The people seemed disorganized and a bit cold, and my heart wasn't satisfied that this is where I needed to be. So I continued along, though, because I knew that Islam had to be true. So I'm just going to, I'm going to be a Muslim. So one day I had some question. I don't remember what it was, but there was a gentleman at my job. His name was Muhammad Malik. And I had some question, and I asked him this question. He says, I'm not really sure, but there's another gentleman who works for this bank, and he could tell you. Here's his name. Look him up on the internal directory. So I looked him up and called him up, and he called me the next morning, and then I went down to meet him. He lived in Queens. His name is Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. Ghulam Rabi is his name, Bangladeshi brother, beautiful brother. So we hung out. We didn't really talk about Islam or Ahmadiyyat particularly. He was more interested in me as a person, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed his company. But one day, after about maybe 2 or 3 months, one day I woke up and I had a crystal feeling in my heart that I couldn't continue going to that mosque. There was something that I had to do to be a part of that community. It's very odd, this feeling, but that I remember crystally. So I called him up, and it just so happened, he said, oh yeah, I was just about to call you, why don't you come on down? We'll offer salat together. So I went on down, and we offered the salat, the evening prayer, Isha. And he says, oh, come up to the library. So it's a funny story, because we sat down at a table, and one of the older members of our community, our dear brother, the late brother Mohsin Mahmood, he was there. And so Ghulam Rabi, he had in his hand what I now know to be the Bayat form. So he just, so I'm just going to read something out to you. But I had actually come there to ask him, what do I need to do to become part of this community? So for the next 5 minutes, he and I sat there arguing, and he wants to explain to me the form that's in front of him, and I'm to listen, I'm not interested in that form, whatever that is. What do I need to do to become part of this? So we went back and forth, and poor Uncle Mohsin sitting there in the middle, and he's like, no, wait, let him talk. No, wait, let him talk. So he's going back and forth until finally I realized that this form, Ghulam Rabi was not going to let me out of his sight without discussing this form. So I said, what is this with this form? You need me to sign this? So I took the form, I went and I signed it and said, okay, there. So is that it? Is that all you need? And he says, but you gotta let me read it to you. I said, fine, knock yourself out, I've already signed it. So he then read it to me, and that's when I realized that the form had a direct bearing. It turned out he wanted to invite me down there to present the Bayat form to me, the oath of allegiance. So interestingly enough, when I think back at it, God again had a hand in me coming into the community, because obviously he put in my heart to go down there to be part of this, to ask what did I need to do to be part of the community, and at the same time put it in this other brother's heart to call me up and to discuss the Bayat form with me. So that's how I became an Ahmadi.
So how would you describe your link with God now, having embraced Ahmadiyyat?
You mean prior, compared to
now,
before becoming
now,
an Ahmadi?
What is your present link? How would you describe that link with God that you have now?
You know, I think my link with God can be compared to a man who leaves his country and doesn't think anything about it, despite being a citizen, right? doesn't think anything about it, doesn't care about the affairs, and just wants to do whatever he wants. He knows it's there,
Right.
but he's just going about. Now I'm back in my country,
Right.
and the head of my country knows about me,
Right.
and calls me, and I talk to him, and I call him,
Right.
and cares about me, and I care about the laws in the country. That's my relationship with God now. I think now it's interesting because one of the blessings of being in Ahmadi for me that I cherish and that I value a great deal and rely upon to some degree is that it never fails that at some important aspect of my life, whether it's job or family related,
Right.
there's always some dream that I see relating to it, whether it's a glad tidings, some good news for me, something that I'm really worried about,
Right.
or someone in my family that I'm really worried about, or whether it's a warning that some unforeseen event is about to happen, and so I'm prepared for it. And it's often that, in fact, the supreme head of our community often appears to me in my dreams.
Right.
Mirza Masroor Ahmed, the fifth Khalifa.
Yeah,
And and may Allah strengthen his hand. And I think this is part of one of the most important parts of my relationship with God, because I see him so frequently in my dreams that it never fails. In fact, right now we're here, just to show you one aspect of it. We're here in Great Britain. I've been living here in this country for about a year, right?
Yeah.
And I remember when I went to apply for a visa, they outright rejected my visa.
Right.
And I couldn't believe, especially being an American, I thought, how on earth are they going to reject my application? I'm an American, why would I come to this tiny island? But anyway, I was shocked. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So I wrote a letter to the Khalifa, and this is true Khilafat.
Yeah.
See, Khilafat is not about running around snatching people's rights. True Khilafat, or the leadership,
Yeah.
supreme leadership,
Yeah.
is about caring for the people, loving the people, taking care of the people.
Yeah.
And this is the relationship that I have with the supreme head, otherwise known as the Khalifa of the
Yeah.
Ahmadiyya Muslim Community. So I wrote to him and gave it to my good friend and asked him if he could send the letter for me.
Right.
The next day, he came to me and said, I completely forgot to mail your letter. I'll mail it tomorrow, I promise. So the morning after that, which was a Friday morning,
Yeah.
I woke up and I saw that I had an email from the UK border agency saying that we have taken a look back at your application.
Right.
And we have decided to overturn the prior decision and to grant you your visa. Please post us a copy of post us your passport as soon as you can. So now the fact of the matter is, a week before that, I was going back and forth with them over the phone, and they told us, stop calling us, stop
Right.
emailing us.
Right.
You have only two options. You can either apply all over again and pay the full fee, or you can appeal the decision, which could take 6 months to a year. These are the only two choices for you. Please do not take this any further.
Right.
I had no communication with them. The letter that I sent to the Khalifa never even reached him. To this day, it has yet to be mailed. So when the letter was written, it was written with sincerity, and it was written with the spirit of love to our Khalifa. And because God has a relationship with everyone,
Yeah.
but since this particular one is God's chosen person, God already knew that the letter was on its way, and God accepted the prayer.
Right.
So this is true love, and this is true leadership. This is true Khilafat. This is one of the main reasons why I remain an Ahmadi and will die an Ahmadi.
Right. Since conversion, have you had any difficulties with your family, friends, anybody like that?
You know, difficulties are of two parts. The first part is that in life, there's always going to be difficulties no matter what you are. You can be an idolater worshiping ants. You're always going to have difficulties.
Yeah.
So that's just a part of life. With respect to that, though, there's a difference.
Yeah.
If you can go through difficulties and you're the only one in that difficulty and there's no one to help you, well then good luck to you. And that actually is the situation of most people on earth. But now becoming an Ahmadi, Number one, I have accepted a messenger that God has sent.
Right.
And for those that believe in God, then they would consider it incumbent to accept someone that comes from God whom they love. Right. I believe that I have accepted that person, and I try to live up to the standards that he has sent. I love the Prophet Muhammad, and I love the Messiah, peace be upon both of them, that God has sent. So that being the case, the difficulties that I'm going to go through, which I'm going to go through anyway, now I have help, right? Yeah. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is that, you know, people have this saying, live your life. And people are going to have that saying anyway, no matter what you are. Sure. People are going to oppose you no matter what you do with your life. Yeah. So that said, yes, there is no doubt. I don't even know where to start, but yeah, there were times where certain family members have kicked me out of their house and I've slept in the field overnight. There are other family members who don't understand what Islam is, and so based upon this misconception, they think that I have become whatever picture they have in their mind of what Islam is due to lack of knowledge. Yeah. So, and those people naturally then begin to treat you, unfortunately, they begin to treat you unjustly because they think you are going to treat them unjust. And they don't see that now they have become the very thing that they say they didn't want you to become. Yeah. So, I mean, that does happen. So yes, from that point of view, I could, you know, take up your time and tell you story after story. Yeah. You know, I've been arrested coming in from Berlin, as a matter of fact, because people thought that I was traveling with two other brothers. One was Pakistani and the other is Bangladeshi. Right. And somebody on the plane thought there were 3 terrorists on board, so they reported us, and you know, we were arrested then and detained for, you know, 9 or 10 hours. But that was because they thought we were just Muslims, not Ahmadiyya Muslims. That's correct. It was when they found out that we were Ahmadis that they were relieved. Right. That this MI5, I think you call them, right. That and Scotland Yard. It was when they realized that we were Ahmadis that they released me. And you know, I'm happy to tell you this story, right, because I wish they would have had cameras there with all of the negative and hurtful stories that you see in the news, right, whether it's because of an Asian person or an Arabic person or especially an African American. I wish I could have videotaped this. It was fantastic, just so that my children and my grandchildren can see it. After they were done interviewing us, after they were done questioning us, I watched them fold my clothes and pack my suitcases for me. And then they all came in and lined up, and one by one they shook my hand and told me it was a pleasure to have met a master warrior. And then they escorted us out of the detention center and took a picture with us. Now, somebody may say, yeah, well, that means nothing because you guys were inconvenienced. But you know, for me, I've never heard a story of a Muslim being arrested and ill-treated and so forth and so on that ended up with them having their hand shook and the authorities taking pictures with them and apologizing. I've never heard of anything like that at all. So it's difficulties like that. To me, it was because of the blessings of being an Ahmadi that once the police realized that we weren't troublemakers, we have nothing to do with terrorism or usurping people's rights. It was when they realized that these people are good people who care about the countries that they live in and even the countries that they don't live in, you know, that these people are nothing to do with this madness. And so it was because of those blessings that I'm happy to be an Ahmadi. Thank you. We are coming to the end of this program. Do you have any special message for the viewers? Yes, I think people should, number one, not rely on their own ignorance or their own lack of knowledge, right? We're always told, and one thing about the Africans, they have these fantastic sayings, right? So we have one that says, never judge a book by its cover, but there's also another one that says, verify the statement of your friend because his opinion may be wrong, right? Sure. So people should make their own investigation, right? Number one. But number two, people should always remember you have a God, you have a creator, and if you're in doubt about any religion or about any particular community, this community has been sent by God. So if you want to know, if you really want to know, and if you're really sincere, then pray to God. Right. Ask Him. He will tell you. He still talks. Right. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, viewers, for all your time and patience. We have come to the end of our program and hope to see you again next time. Till then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah.